All right, I think we're good. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we're here with another virtual event tonight. And we're really delighted to have our good friend Robert Dugoni back with us to talk about his brand new book, The Silent Sisters. And Robert signed a bunch of copies for us. We've got some right there. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field on YouTube and Facebook to our web store if you'd like to purchase an autographed copy. And also, if you have questions for Mr. Dugoni or Barbara, go ahead and put them in, and Barbara will summon me towards the end of the hour, and I'll magically reappear on screen with any questions that you might have. So, Barbara, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrick. I should add, because we're so used to autographed books and all that's what we really talk about. But in point of fact, you can buy the unautographed paperback edition of this book. In addition, Robert's publisher, Thomas and Mercer, makes them available in hardcover and paperback at the same time. So I always mean to add that in. And anyway, this is my advanced reading copy. I feel so lucky to have it. So Bob and I have been together forever, actually, through his legal thrillers, through Tracy Crosswhite, through his marvelous standalones. And then what started out to be what I thought was a standalone called The Eighth Sister. And then somehow or other, it got a sequel. And now it's a trilogy. And for all I know, it's going to turn into a tetralogy. And then I don't know how far this is going to go. What engaged you in spy stories, Robert?
First of all, I'm impressed that you knew what four. I didn't know tetralogy. I didn't know any of those things. So, I was contacted by a gentleman who had a jury master and asked me where I got the story, and particularly where I got the story of Charles Jenkins, and could we get together and have a cup of coffee? And I immediately said no, which every author will tell you is kind of what you say. And then he emailed me again sort of the next day and said, I've read the next two books in your David Sloan series. I mean, the 3 in 2 days. And anyway, the short of a long story is I made an appointment to have a cup of coffee with him at a place. I looked him up first on the internet. And he was legit, a businessman actually in Bellevue, and had his own company and everything. And then before I went to go there, I decided to go back on the internet and just make sure. And I looked and I Googled and I was going through the pages and pages, and way down, I found a gentleman that had a similar name to his, who had been exonerated. He was tried for espionage and exonerated. And he was the first, I don't know if he's the only, but he was the first CIA agent who was exonerated. And so the short of a long story is, when we sat down to kind of start to talk, and I stopped him and said, are you aware that there's a guy out there with a name very similar to yours? And he said, that's me. And so he kind of told me his story, what happened to him, which a lot of the trial in The Eighth Sister is based on. But it wasn't in Russia, and it wasn't really a sexy story, but I thought it was interesting that he related this all back to the jury master, where Charles Jenkins got his start. So I started thinking, this could be interesting. And I had been to Russia, and Russia is an enigma. I mean, let's face it, look what's going on in the world today. It's an enigma. It's a country that is constantly stirring trouble. So it was kind of a perfect setup for the story, and the story just sort of developed from there.
So The Eighth Sister, what does that actually mean? Because it's going to resonate all the way through here to The Silent Sisters.
So The Eighth Sister is related to the following. In Moscow has for years and years and years had sleeper cells in the United States. That is, individuals who basically are masked as Americans. In fact, the show The Americans is all about that. It's about Russian agents who are living as Americans in America, and they're spying. And the United States has never really done that, because the CIA hasn't had, if you believe all the research I did, they haven't had the patience to do that. And my book, The Eighth Sister, postulates that, in fact, they did. And there are 7 women, unrelated, unconnected, who were born into families who were American spies, and they have become spies. And over the years, 40 years, they have moved up the hierarchy into some pretty prominent positions in the Russian government, et cetera. And they have been providing the United States with information. In the eighth sister, it becomes apparent that those women are being exposed. They're being double crossed. And Jenkins is sent to Russia under false pretexts to find who is the person that is exposing them, who they have labeled the eighth sister. Then in The Last Agent, Jenkins is called back to Russia for a reason that I can't really disclose without giving away a big part of the book, but he goes as a matter of honor and duty and loyalty. In The Seventh Sister, The Silent Sisters, the book that we're talking about tonight, he goes back to finish what he started. There are two women who are Putin is trying to find. He is it's Operation Herod. I mean, he's going after every woman potentially of any prominence in the Russian government, the military, whatever, and he's trying to find them. And so the two women have gone silent, and Jenkins' job is to go and find out if they've turned, if they've been caught, or if they're trying to get out. And if they are, he's got to get them out.
So one of the interesting things about this trilogy now is that the first book ends with a dramatic escape, a really dramatic escape, and goes across the Black Sea. And, you think, okay, Jenkins went in, did his job, got out, all is well. Second book is about him going back. So instead of escape, he is in fact penetrating Russia. So it's harder to reverse engineer the escape than you might think. But then, of course, at the end, he's forced to escape again. So here we are now with book 3, The Silent Sisters. And once again, he's going to need to go into Russia in order to accomplish this. But let me go back and say, when you say these women are American, were these Americans somehow implanted in Russia? Were they in Russia, born to American parents and stayed? What?
Russian people that were opposed to the Soviet government and who the CIA turned when they turned them at that point, and so they have children and they raise these children. They're really they're not opposed to Russia. They're opposed to the Russian government. They're opposed to the authoritarian government. First the communist government, and now the government that Putin has installed, which is an authoritarian government.
Got it. So they're actually Russian, but ideologically American. In America, as I understood it, there were actual people of Russian extraction posing as Americans rather than Americans who've been ideologically aligned to Russia. So
correct.
Presumably it would be harder to take a Native American and implant them in Russia than the other way around.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be tough to vet, and that's really the whole premise behind the book is they want this to be as authentic as they can possibly make it to get away with it. And the hard part, Barb, in this whole thing was Jenkins having a legitimate reason that he would go back, given what's at stake for him. And the second book was actually easy. It's a matter of honor. It's a matter of duty. And this book, it was a little more difficult, but there is a very prominent, reason. These women have served the United States all these years, and if he doesn't get them out, they're probably going to die. And so he's a man of great moral integrity and ethics and doing the right thing. So I actually had a couple people say, you can't possibly have him going back in a third time, but I've also had advanced readers providing reviews that are calling this the best of the 3 books. So I think that's really telling. I think that it might be the best of the 3 books as well.
Well, it's hard to choose among your children. Come on, Robert. But I think the thing is, in the second book, he went back for one specific woman, and he knew who she was.
Right.
And it reminds me of the Tom Cruise movie. I can't remember which, but where he has to go back and he actually has to break into prison.
Yeah.
In order to extract her. So, left to 4-0 prison or whatever it is. but it's a specific person. And this one, he's going back and they aren't easily identified. They're
Right.
silent, so he doesn't know who they are. So it's a different mission, even if he's returning.
It is, and one of the biggest obstacles he faces is he's African American, and I think the African population in Russia is something like 0.1%. And so really what he has to do in this instance, when he goes back the first time, he's trying to get caught. He's trying to them to know that he's there. So it doesn't matter that he's African American, but in this one, he's not trying to get caught. And so I was able to bring in a lot of the whole disguises that CIA agents will use. And most CIA agents, they don't use disguises because they're really not undercover. Russia knows who all our CIA agents are over there, and we know who all the Russian KGB is over here, or FSB now. But they have a fascinating mask division within the CIA. And there's actually a couple books out there by the guy that at one point was the leader of that division. And I was able to read those books and find out what they did and how they did it. So it allows for Jenkins to get back into the country and not be identified, because he also finds out before he goes that he's on a kill list, and that he will be, if he is caught, he will be killed. There will be no negotiation for him to come back, and that kill list is real. It really exists, and we saw it happen in London when the two GFB agents showed up in London and killed that gentleman and almost killed his daughter, or almost killed that gentleman and almost killed his daughter.
Yeah,
it's real.
No, it is real. But I was thinking that there's a certain James Bond quality to this new book. You sort of look for M flitting around. Not M. Who's the disguise guy in Bond? It's not M, because M is.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the guy that makes the cool car and the all the. So what you're doing is really using spycraft. More traditional spycraft here. This is not hackers and high tech kind of stuff, but this is more boots on the ground and old fashioned spycraft to cover him up. And what about the language? I studied Russian for 2 years at Stanford, and it's a tough language. It operates differently. It has declensions. That it has a treacherous alphabet in that, like the Greek alphabet, there are letters in the Russian alphabet that resemble the Roman alphabet, but they're not the same letters. So what we think of as an M is a T, and and it makes it harder.
Sure.
It's hard to unlearn the assignment you make to this particular letter and ascribe it to something else. So I don't know. We had to do both. I don't know if you can pick up written Russian through language programs and so forth much more easily than if you're trying to. Spoken Russian, than if you're trying to learn it from written Russian.
So I guess my question for you is: Are you a spy? Is that why you?
No, I was, but I've been. Actually, we did have. You'll love this. In 2011, before all this routine started with Putin, my husband and I took a voyage around the Black Sea. It was Istanbul round trip, which was fabulous. We went east. We actually went to Sochi, and eventually we got to Ukraine. And we went to the Crimea and so forth. And for any of you know history in Sevastopol, that was the Crimean War locus that the British fought. But anyway, the Russian Navy, because although more recently there is, but even in 2011, wasn't a dependable warm water port for the Russian Navy. In World War II, they did use Murmansk, which is way up high on the Arctic Circle, for various things. But one of the reasons St. Petersburg was built by Peter the Great was that he wanted to have a warm water port, i.e. on the Balkan, so that Russia could be a naval power, because in the Black Sea, they're bottled up by Turkey. They're bottled up by the Dardanelles and the Turkish Straits. Excuse me, I keep losing my voice. Sorry. Anyway, we're in Sebastopol, and they do excursions from ships. So various people went off. And I said to Rob, let's ditch these people. I can still speak some Russian. And so we went down to the water, and there was a little Russian tour group. There was a little, like wooden boat, and Russians all lined up to get on the wooden boat in the whole bit. So we went up, and I bought 2 tickets and said hello to everybody. Nobody said anything. So there we are, 2 Americans in this Russian group. And then what this boat did was it sailed through the Russian Navy. I mean, I'm telling you, we went all through the whole Russian Navy anchored in Sebastopol, and it was just surreal. And we had cameras, we took photos, and I said, Tara, I can hardly believe this, that we're able to do this. And then we went on to other parts of Odessa and so forth, but I've never forgotten that, just cruising through the Russian Navy there in Sebastopol, the warm water port, and thinking how 10 years makes a difference. We just canceled a river trip from Moscow to St. Petersburg. We spent a lot of time in St. Petersburg, and the point of that trip was to go to Moscow and then do that. And I thought, it was one thing to cruise the Russian Navy in 2011, but I don't really think this is an opportune moment to sign up to be an American tourist in Russia.
No, it's actually very dangerous, apparently. I won't go back. I spent about a month in Russia in 1998 when they were just coming out of détente, and they were doing, everything was just getting going. I mean, we literally saw the start of capitalism in Moscow, and how hard it was for businesses to get going. But and the people were lovely. I mean, the people were lovely. They were very guarded, and if you approached them, they were guarded. But once you said to them, can you help me with directions? They were very helpful, very lovely people. But they were coming out of 80 years of you had to be careful who you talked to and what you said. You might be on your way to the gulag. And I feel bad for those people now, because I don't think the real Russian population knows exactly what's going on. I think the misinformation is really so high that they don't really have a full clue about what is happening. And it's sad, but you see reports of CIA officers getting the crap beat out of them when they leave the embassy, and before they can get to the safety of their home, which is another safe ground. Somebody will jump them, and I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go back there now with Putin in power. Not a chance.
Well, I have to agree. We went. It wasn't too many years after that, maybe 2016 or something. We had a chance to go with the Friends of the Hermitage and spend a week in St. Petersburg. And the Hermitage, normally, if you're lucky, you get a 2-hour tour if you're there as a tourist. But we were going to spend the entire week in the Hermitage with selected other little things, but basically every day we were, and we had a choice between going in October and December. And we had been to St. Petersburg in the summer for a long tour and defeated in a few attempts to do things by the sheer crowds, particularly the Japanese, who tend to tour in long lines, and you can't really break into them. So if they are occupying a room or doing something, you're pretty much excluded. That's just the way they travel. And I said to Rob, if we're going to go back, and I really want to do this, I'm going to go in December. We're going to do the real Russia, and so I brushed up on some of my Russian. And it's an easy flight from San Francisco to Frankfurt to St. Petersburg, and the reverse. We just had to zip over to St. Petersburg. We arrived in a blizzard, and the highway between St. Petersburg and Russia was completely backed up. They were sending out food carts. Nobody knew how to drive in the snow. And I said to Rob, okay, here's where like Tolstoy comes in. Clearly, it was easier with sleighs and horses than automobiles to deal, with the Russian winter. So the whole time we were there, it was incredibly cold and snowy and the whole bit. But it felt very, very safe. They never mentioned Putin. They didn't, he's from St. Petersburg, but they never brought him up, never wanted to discuss him. And we remembered that when we were in some places in 2011 on that trip, some of the old people really missed Stalin because life had certainty. They didn't like trying to navigate for themselves. And that's when I recognized that if a country's always been an autocracy, always been one, they haven't got any concept really of self-government or any actual wish for it. They want to be told. They're used to being told what to do. They're used to that kind of structure. They're used to, and I think that Putin, is trying to remake himself in the image of the czars. And then Stalin. I mean, the Russian Revolution was just a joke. The problem was, as with the French Revolution, you had the wrong guy on the throne at a moment of political instability. Neither Louis XVI nor Nicholas II had any clue about actually governing or what to do. And, so they French traded in Louis for Napoleon, and the Russians traded in Nicholas for Stalin. And, where did they go? Think about how lucky we were that we actually got George Washington. And, a person who actually went home when his time was done. And
what you say is so true, because we were in China a couple of years ago, and we went with family, but a couple of friends went with us, and those same friends had been to China about 5 years prior, and they told us a story about being in China and what was said to them about democracy, and basically said, do you know what America's problem is? Well, we're on a bus and we're going to see the pandas, and somebody asked our guide a question. It was just our family. It's like 12 of us, 10 of us. And the guard said, do you know what's wrong with Americans? And my buddy, who had been there before, he turned around and looked at me like, here we go. And sure enough, the guy said verbatim, he said, the problem with Americans is you people have far too many choices. Here, the government tells us what it's going to do, and it gets done, and that's it. And I'm sitting there like, and my buddy turns and looks at me, and it's like, that's all the years under Mao and everybody else. It's like the government is going to take care of you. They're going to get things done, and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, people got, the structure is a very comforting thing. Rules, make life certain. And China too went from, emperors to a brief period of chaos, and then to Mao. And now they got Z, so I read something yesterday, I think it might have been in the Wall Street Journal. It was either the Times or the Journal, but basically the question was being asked, is this going to be the century of the strong man again? And, everywhere you look, that appears to be what's going on for the moment, whether it's, the guy in Hungary, or whether it's Erdogan in Turkey, or whether it's Modi trying to, run India like the British did, or, it was Korea, whatever it is. And you have to wonder, whether our experiment is really going to hold, or whether the attempt by a person here to be a strong man, will rally our defenses. I mean, it really is an interesting and scary time to live in, and you have to wonder if the center is going to hold.
It is, and that was an article in the New York Times, because I read the same article.
Oh, okay.
And it is a scary time, but it also is one that I think you have to put in perspective. Hopefully we're not going down a path that we can't get out of. And when I wrote The World Played Chess, that was something that my contacts really stressed to me is, you got to put everything in perspective. We're not living in World War II. We're not living in World War I. We're not living in a time where that you have all that. But that doesn't mean it's not scary. I agree with you that, where this could potentially lead, and how fragile things are, especially because of what you're talking about, the New York Times article about the rise of the strongman. And they said that in the last, I think, 10 years, they said something about we've lost more democracies than we've gained.
Well, I think that's true. But in any case, in your book, here's Charles Jenkins, doing his James Bond sort of thing, going into Russia. And you're right. I think that, the fact that he's a Black American certainly makes it more challenging in terms of the need for disguise. And it has to be a total disguise too. I mean, it can't be like, you just change your eye color or something of the sort. And his mission is to try to find these two women to see what's going on. But Jenkins, in I think it was book 2, actually got out of Russia. Then he was betrayed. Then he was arrested, and then eventually exonerated. But I think an interesting question, Bob, that you deal. Why is he loyal, to doing all this when he's been treated so badly?
Yeah, he's a patriot. He's loyal to the concept of democracy. He's loyal to the concept of what the United States stands for. But more importantly, he's loyal to those women. They served America, they served this country, and he is not going to let them be betrayed. He is not going to let them die. He just feels that if there's anybody that is in a position to get them out, it's him, because he knows and understands who the seven sisters were and what they did. And he's a man of high moral integrity. He's a man of ethics, and he's a man that is, he's going to do the right thing. He's not going to let those women be betrayed after all that they did to serve this country. So he goes back, and he knows the risk, and he knows the potential consequences. He has a wife, he has 2 kids. Some people could call it selfish, but that's not how he perceives it. He perceives it as a duty, that if he doesn't undertake it, they're going to die. And they've already lost 3 of the women. 3 of the women were already identified and killed. And he just can't live with that on his conscience.
So is this an official CIA mission, or is this a Charles Jenkins, I'm going to do it alone mission?
No, he is working under the auspices of the I forgot his name, but under the auspices of the young CIA officer who has taken over and has become sort of his handler. But it's all off the books. And he tells him up front, we need you to do this. We want you to do this, but it's off the books. If you get caught, we have no idea you're there, and we will deny any knowledge that you're there, because they have to. Because often what happens in these situations is we find somebody that's been doing something really horrible over here, and we arrest them. And then Putin sends the FSB out, and they just go arrest anybody, who hasn't done anything. And they say, when you release this guy, we'll release this person. I mean, they did that with the Russian female attorney who was here back when they basically kicked them all out of the United States. She was culpable in so many things, and we arrested her. They went and they arrested. So the United States doesn't want that to happen, because they know kind of how valuable Jenkins is. And that's what sort of sets this all up, because there's a guy in Russia that once he figures out that Jenkins is there, he thinks, if I can use him, I can save my bacon. And that's one of the fun parts about writing these espionage stories, is they're chase books. I mean, that's what they are. They're chase books. And I've had a chance to research some of the most amazing things, small airplane flights, landing on skis. What happens if one of the skis breaks off? The underground waterways in Russia. An entire river has been covered over by the city, but it still exists below ground. Russia has a metro system that is below the metro system that people take, and it's used only by authorities and people to get them someplace quickly and get them out. They have entire cities underground that are vacant, and if there's ever they were built because if there was ever a nuclear war, that's where the authorities would go to be taken. So, I have an opportunity to just do all this fabulous research and then, work my characters into the whole thing and have fun with it.
Well, of course you do. Of course, one of the things that's really going to make it interesting is climate change, because, Russia, much of it was in permafrost.
Right.
And, as all that is changing, some of their great strategies may indeed not be viable. I remember going to Murmansk. I mean, I never actually thought I would go to Murmansk, but it was a major World War II naval base under very difficult circumstances. It's up on the Arctic Circle, kind of not in the middle, well, maybe kind of in the middle of Russia. I can't remember exactly, but I think so. Anyhow, we sail around Norway and we go across and we go to Murmansk. It was 98 degrees. I have never quite been so hot as I was touring a museum in Murmansk. I mean, because there's no air conditioning, there's no bug control, there's no, because it was cold, right? So nobody ever thought you'd need any of this stuff. And now that the world is changing, a lot of what's been built, if it's built on the permafrost, same problem in Alaska, actually, it's not going to hold up. Yes. So, there's a lot of interesting questions, I think, that are going to arise as everything is moving north. And as some of the sea lanes are going to move away from the Panama Canal, and instead they're going to go across the top of the world because you can navigate it now. Rob and I took that first Northwest Passage cruise on Crystal that went from Seward, Alaska, all the way, up through the Bering Sea, all the way around Alaska, all the way across the top of Canada, ended up in Greenland. And part of that was pointing out the tragic voyage. I'm trying to remember who it is now, but the British guy.
Shackelford.
Thank you. No, it's not Shackleton. He was the South Pole. It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, they all died trying to navigate the Northwest Passage. And now, a cruise ship went through it with an icebreaker in front of it. So now they're talking about China, instead of going across the Pacific and through the Panama Canal, they can now go across the top and get to Norway. So in fact, Brad Thor wrote a really interesting, I think his last book for Scott Harvath postulated the fact that maybe it was the Chinese, not the Russians anyway, were trying to take over a Norwegian fishing village up on the, towards the top in order to establish a base so they could claim territory in the Arctic, but also because shipping traffic was going to increase. So much about what that we have known about the geopolitics of the world is going to change dramatically with climate. And Russia will be a huge player in that.
Yeah, they're trying to take control of the Arctic up there and say it's their territory, and that's a battle. That's going to be a battle that comes about for that very reason, that it's unexplored. It's rich. There's a whole who knows what all is up there. Gas.
Well, there's a lot of treasures up there, but there's also the possibility of disease being unleashed, and a whole lot of things that make it, just as that's true in the Amazon, as it's being deforested, and we may be letting loose pathogens and so forth that we have no defense for. So where we are at the moment, I don't know why this is getting gloomy. Sorry about that. Progress on to something else, right? The Franklin, thank you, Patrick. It is the Franklin expedition that came to grief in the Northwest Passage. And a lot of research has indicated that what might have done them in was not the cold, but the provisions they took at the beginning of the canning industry may have all poisoned them with lead poisoning because, it was improperly understood. So, fascinating stuff here. But meantime, here's Charles, loose in Russia. He's managed to get back in. And once again, he's going to need to get out. So are you spending part of your time writing these novels, planning escape routes? You've got to penetrate, but then you got to go the other way.
Yeah, no, I do. I do a lot. I do a lot of research. I sent him in the opposite direction this time. I sent him up in Siberia on the train up there, and of course, what I really wanted was I wanted a situation where he was wanted by more than just the authorities, and I wanted that conflict at the end. With the Russia, you have the Russian mafia that have their own interests in capturing him. You have the Russian authority who has their own interest in catching him. And then, of course, you have the Moscow police officer who's investigating a murder. And he wants to talk to Jenkins for a reason. And all of these things, I wanted them to converge in one place. And I just had a heck of a lot of fun writing this story. Arkhip Mishkin, who's the Russian detective out of Moscow, is maybe one of the favorite characters I've ever written. I had so much fun creating him and who he is and his background, and the Russian mafia. I spent a lot of time reading books on the Russian mafia, and created a character that was sort of an amalgamation of several well-known Russian mafia leaders who books have been written about. And then I changed it even more by making it a her, and which is very unusual in Russia because it's a misogynistic society. So how does she survive? She's ruthless. I mean, she's brutal, and so that adds to Jenkins' problem as well. And what I wanted to do was blur the lines between good and evil. To get out of Russia, Jenkins has to rely upon an old adversary to provide him help. And how does he provide help? By going to the Russian mafia that's in Irkutsk, who doesn't get along with the Russian mafia in Moscow, which is a true story. And so they don't want the Russian mafia from Moscow coming into Sigor. So you have all these factors coming involved, and what I wanted was, you don't know really where it's all going to end. And I opened the book really with the ending of the book, and I just like I said, it's just one of those stories that was a heck of a lot of fun to research, and a heck of a lot of fun to write.
Having some trouble reconciling with your heck a lot of fun with the absolutely gruesome scene in the slaughterhouse, Robert. I mean, it makes you sound like you're some sort of sadist.
Oh, I know, and some of the early reviews have pointed out, it's like, oh my God, this really opens with a bang, and it does. But Jenkins, he puts himself in peril.
Yeah.
And you can't put yourself in peril 3 times and not have anything come of it. You know what I mean? There comes a point in time where, if you don't make your antagonists real, then they become Keystone Cops. And these antagonists are real. I mean, the Russian mafia is ruthless. It's brutal. And it's smart. It's intelligent. They say that the Russians have accomplished in 20 years what it took the Italian mafia 200 years to figure out. And that part of that is because a lot of people in the Russian mafia are people that were part of the government when it was the Soviet Union, and when it broke up, they couldn't get jobs. So you have nuclear physicists who are working in the Russian mafia, smart people. So the threat is real, and I needed to let it play out.
Well, Jenkins is not James Bond in the sense that he's Teflon coated. That is for sure. And actually, you raise an interesting point. I remember back in the 90s when the women's sleuth movement was so strong, that women's sleuths were not allowed to be moms. They were not allowed to have children, because then there was always that moral question of what kind of mother would you be if you put yourself in deadly peril, and left your child defenseless. And all. So in a way, you've created this problem for Jenkins. I mean, he does have, he's in his 60s, right? But he has a new wife, and he has young children. And although he's not going to leave them parentless because his wife is not in all this, there is an ethical question about, does a person with very young children and a new family, can he really put himself at this kind of risk? And what kind of obligation does he owe his wife and children?
It is. It's not black and white. It's not a black and white question. He's torn by it, which is, I think, what every writer wants his protagonist to be, which is conflicted. He's conflicted about what he's doing and why he's doing it, and the potential consequences of it. And that raises the tension for the reader, because the reader knows what the consequences are. The reader understands it, and the reader is asking the same question you're doing. Why is he doing this? And you have to have a really good reason for it. And I think that really good reason is based upon who he is at his core.
Well, I wasn't asking why he did it. I was just saying that the risks are not just his.
No,
the risks are also assumed by his wife and children.
Absolutely.
Whether they voted for it or not. It didn't. It's hard to make. I mean, the kids aren't old enough to make this a family decision.
Yeah. That's one of the questions for my editor and I have been kicking around. Do I continue with him? Potentially in a different situation, maybe Egypt, where I just visited and met some special forces guys that had very interesting stories to tell me. Or is it, am I at a point where, I've completed his story, and he should be able to live on Camino Island and raise his kids and be a father and all those things. And I don't know what the answer to that is yet. I never do. I'm always books ahead.
Right.
This book comes out tomorrow on the 22nd, and then I got the next Tracy book coming out in August, and I just completed a standalone with a female public defender, and I think that's going to be a series. So what do I do with Jenkins? I don't know yet.
Well, maybe he's a guy that can run a younger agent. There's always that possibility of not a father-son thing, but a mentor, whatever it is that, that because of his family and all the rest of it, maybe he's going to be more tied to a desk, but he can work with a guy that's out in the field. That's a potential for you. Because you've underlined something which I think is really interesting. The pandemic is, for you, been a time of unusual creativity. You've had more time and you've used it, whereas other people have found it difficult. For you, it seems to have unleashed a whole kind of font of creativity.
People that talk to me, I get animated when I start talking about stories and writing. I mean, my characters are very real to me. They're very real to me. And when I'm in my room here and I'm creating, people say, don't you get bored? Don't you get lonely? I'm never bored. I'm never lonely.
No.
I've taken up, some hobbies like golf, which is narcissistic, I've learned. But it's fun as hell. And I work hard all day. And then at 4 o'clock, especially in the summer in the Northwest, it's light until 10 o'clock out. I go out with my buddies and we have a great time. But I love what I do, and I'm blessed to be able to do what I love. I always tell my kids, find your passion and find a way to make a living at it.
Well, you've always been a storyteller. Back years and years ago, when you were discouraged and thinking about quitting and I beat you up, it was partly because I knew that without your ability to tell your stories and all that it would really, you wouldn't be you. It would be deeply damaging to you.
It would be, and the listeners and the viewers, they can't see, but I have my pencil and my desk is down below, and I just wrote down Jenkins becomes handler for Alex, Sloan's son. This
is not the first Robert Dugoni book that I have plotted.
It is not. And I'm going to be calling you saying, okay, you gave me this great idea. Let's talk about it.
Actually, I think there's some really interesting things you can do with it. I'll be happy to talk to you about it, because I think, not only a moral question, but a physical question. He is, I'm older than you are. So I know that your body, even though you think you're still okay, can't do the things that it once did or take that kind of punishment. So I think, both on the grounds of his family and so forth, but on the fact that he really can't continue to do all that. I'll remind you of Nevada Barr, who stopped writing her wonderful Anna Pigeon series because Anna got too old to do the kinds of things, that the series was famous for and that a park ranger could do. And Nevada couldn't bring herself to, she'd aged her in real time, to make a travesty of that. And right. I think it's a combination for you there that Charles could be really, really interesting, more in the role of M, than a Bond. Yeah. And I think he might make a really fabulous mentor. Think about it.
Yeah, and he's, if it's Jake, that goes down this path, Sloan's son, then he's going to feel an obligation beyond just it's one of his agents. He's got a personal connection to this kid. But at the same time, he's taking care of his wife and his kids, which I think is an important thing. So there's a lot of ways we can go. And, some of this, to be honest with you, it's time. How do you trying to get all these things done and stay on time? I've never missed a deadline. Never missed a deadline. And that's something I take pride in. I think that, I think it's important to get books done early so they can be edited properly and vetted properly. I never want to put a book out there that I'm not proud of. I don't think it's fair to the reader. And I think it can be a killer for an author. You know, if a reader ever starts to sense that you're just throwing books out there, you know, that's not going to bode well. So, you know, it's just a matter of time, being able to produce quality in the time.
Well, you may be forced one of these days to be more realistic about how many books you can write in a year. You know, this is an unusual time when you've been able to write more, but you know, down the road, you may have to say, wait, you know, to do this. I've known many. I remember Sue Grafton and I had a long discussion about, you know, she was under pressure to do a book a year, and we finally discussed it. And she said, you know, I said, ask for 18 months. You know, just, I mean, you don't have to do a book a year, you know, push it back. And Dennis Lehane was actually sitting in front of me at the Poison Pen talking about Mystic River when Mystic River came out. And I remember him sitting there looking at us and said, you know, it had just like made the Times list or whatever was going on. And his publisher had called and they wanted to sign him up for more. And, you know, what did he want? You know, I mean, they were going to offer him like the whole moon. And he said, I sat and I thought about it. And he said, I decided that what I was going to ask for was time.
Interesting.
And that is what he did. You know, if they were willing to offer him whatever it took to keep him, what he decided was to ask for time.
Yeah. Well, you know, my publisher is fabulous. They will.
Yeah, your publisher would be happy, I think, to do that. They're a wonderful publisher.
Yeah. No, but right now I just love writing the story. So
but see, you're doing it to yourself.
I am.
So you may have to have a Charles Jenkins moment of your very own.
I'm you know, I'm kind of taking a page out of your playbook. You know, I'm trying to travel more. I went to Egypt, as you know, in November. I'm going to the Galapagos in May. I'm supposed to go back to Africa in June. So there's just, you know, all those things you have to factor in. But I'm 61. I turned 61 a couple of days ago, and I'm not getting any younger. And you know, there's places in the world I'd like to see while I can still see them.
Oh, you're just a child. Come on. Well, from my standpoint, he's definitely a child. Actually, we're going to Tahiti at the end of April, back on the little sailing yacht that we have taken a couple of trips on, just because it's time to go somewhere. And, you know, having canceled the trip to Russia. You know what we did with the trip to Russia, and then we'll take questions. I don't know if anybody cares about all this, but one of the things I realize is that I have more than my husband, traveled in a lot of places in our own country, in the United States, that we have missed. And the company that we were going to take the trip from Moscow to St. Petersburg allowed us to take that money and convert it to another trip. And so, you know, the trip we're going to take, Duluth, around the Great Lakes to Toronto.
Oh, fabulous. You know, my mom did that trip.
I'm really excited about it. And, you know, we're going to go to BoucherCon in September for a couple of days, and then we're going to take St. Paul to St. Louis, go down the Mississippi for a week. Yeah. I mean, I've been on all the other great rivers except the Amazon, and I thought, why have I missed the Mississippi?
Yeah.
You know, so there's plenty of travel opportunities here at home if we, you know, don't want to go abroad. This will be the moment to bring Patrick back after blathering around here and see if anybody has any real questions they'd like to ask, or Patrick has any questions he'd like to ask.
Let's see here. Well, yes. Okay, Jacqueline says or asks, Robert, do you do all of your research up front, or do you do it as you write?
A little bit of both. There's definitely research that I know I'm going to need, and I know I can't really get started until I do it. And a lot of scenes come out of your research. You know, the meat packing plant, that came out of my research. And so, you know, a lot of it I do. But then, you know, because we have the computers now and I have two screens, it's easier for me to just simply, if I get to something and I say, like today, what does the Monroe Correctional Facility in Washington State look like? I can just pull it up and find a video, a YouTube or whatever of it, and then I can fill in that blank. But for the meat of the story, you know, the real meat of the story, like the Russian mafia in this particular story, I probably read 5 or 6 books on, you know, biographies on the Russian mafia, educational books, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I do a little bit of both.
let's see here. Oh, Cheryl points out correctly. Russia didn't trade Romanov for Stalin. They traded Romanov for Lenin. Quite right. Lenin was first.
I'm sorry, but they got Stalin in the end. Actually, the French didn't trade Louis for Napoleon. There was the whole intervening step.
Let's see. Eileen says, I just want to thank the pen for continuing to bring our favorite authors to us. And to Bob, thank you for your time and engagement on Goodreads and social media.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thank you for letting me be on there.
Yeah. That's about it. Just a lot of people are saying how much they like your work, Bob. And Jacqueline says, Charles is my favorite character of yours.
Well, tell Jacqueline that now that I've consulted with Barb, I may be able to continue the series.
We may collaborate on our first Charles Jenkins. Actually, we almost collaborated on an escape route through Egypt over by the Red Sea. So I haven't forgotten that. Bob and I really do go all the way back. It's been a wonderful relationship with, and I'm so pleased that after some difficult twists and turns that Bob has found the right place to be so that he can in fact tell all these wonderful stories.
Yeah, I can't thank booksellers like you and Booktree here in Kirkland, Washington, and I can't thank Amazon Publishing enough. I mean, they've treated me honestly and fairly, and that's all I ever asked for in a publisher. And they are really good people. And you know, the other thing is I'm a big believer in allowing people to do their job, and they do their job extremely well. And you at Poison Pen do your jobs extremely well. You know, you guys, you make books available, you make authors available, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, as always, for having me.
Well, we can't do any of it without you and authors like you. So we certainly do thank you. Also, we can't do it without viewers. So thank you very much for those of you who have tuned in. And those of you who support the authors by buying books, because that's basically how this whole thing works. The authors can't, you know, it's not an eleemosynary, to use that wonderful word. It's not an eleemosynary system. You know, authors need to get paid. Bookstores have to make enough money to pay their staff. So it goes. So with that in mind, let me remind you that we have autographed copies of The Silent Sisters, Book 3, in the Charles Jenkins forthcoming tetralogy. And there's also an unsigned paperback edition, which is less expensive, but reads just the same should you wish to buy it. So Bob, love to your beautiful wife and to your editor and your publicist, who I'm very fond of. One of these days, I'm hoping, probably August is not the right time to come to Phoenix, but whatever the next book is where you feel like you can withstand the climate, I hope you're going to come back and see us.
I will be back.
All right. Sounds great.